All right, he joins us every single Tuesday and Wednesday. He is Dusty Dvoracek, and he is live on the ref. What's going on, Dusty? How are you, man?
Fantastic and improving, Mr. Plank. How you doing?
Good, good. When do you usually take off? Thursday night for Columbia, or how does the travel schedule work?
Typically, I leave after my morning show. Oftentimes, I usually go through DFW.
Gotcha.
Which tomorrow will be no different. And so I usually catch a flight between 10 and 11. Tomorrow it's actually about 2, headed to DFW and then directly into Como for a Battle of the Tigers with Auburn and Missouri. So I'll have a pretty good scout for you on the Missouri Tigers. We already had a chance to see the Auburn Tigers so far this season, but I'm really looking forward to that one. And for Auburn, as I think Sooner fans know, I mean, better than their record indicates. They've got some real talent on that team. I think we're going to have a really good game going on at the exact same time as Oklahoma and South Carolina. I really think Auburn can push them, and I think either team's got a really good chance to win this.
So two quick things, non-OU related. I did, and Vanderbilt deserves some love, right? They've beaten Alabama. They just beat Kentucky, who's a hard team to figure out. But I noticed Heather Dinich had talked about it whenever she was on ESPN yesterday, and Connor O'Gara talked about it on Twitter today. Not only is that starting to look like, it's a terrible loss because you lost at home, but by the end of the season, Dusty, there's a pretty good chance that as much as we wrote off Alabama because they lost at home to Vanderbilt, they could still be right in the middle of this thing for the playoff spot and maybe the SEC championship, and that might not be as bad of a loss as people think.
No, it's not. And I got some extensive look at Vanderbilt, watching them against Missouri. They took Missouri to overtime in Columbia. I mean, they had a really good chance to win that game, and obviously Diego Pavia gets a ton of fanfare, and he should. That offense, it's basically the triple option, and they are physical, and it is. You better be disciplined. It is challenging to defend that offense. And defensively, man, they're getting after it. Like, they punched Missouri right in the mouth. This past week, they went to Lexington, and they won by holding Kentucky to 13 points. Not that Kentucky's some offensive juggernaut, but this wasn't like Vanderbilt lighting up the scoreboard the way that they did the week prior against Alabama. They went on the road, rolled their sleeves up, had under 300 yards of offense, and still found a way to get a win. So I don't want to overhype Vanderbilt, but that's a legit football team, man. Like, they got Ball State this week, and you know who comes to Nashville a week from this weekend?
Is it Texas?
The Texas Longhorns.
Look at me.
Are taking their talents out to Nashville. So, yeah, I mean, you tell me if I'm wrong. That's got to be one of the coaching jobs of the year by Clark Lee and his staff, right? I mean, from a turnaround. Do you realize last year they went 0-8 in SEC play? They didn't have a single SEC game within 2 touchdowns. They lost every game by more than 14 points in SEC play. And here they are already with a win over Alabama, win over Kentucky, pushing Missouri on the road to the brink. And, they're about to get to 5 wins after this weekend. It's a remarkable story. Great turnaround.
Really cool. Really, really cool to see what they're doing. And secondly, that Texas-Georgia matchup's going to be fun this weekend. Now, here's the funny thing. Is Georgia's not necessarily been the dominant Georgia that we've seen.
Yeah.
But is it also a team that you feel like is getting a little bit better as the season progresses, or do they have real issues there in Athens?
They just haven't put 4 quarters together.
Right.
Just look at the Jekyll and Hyde against Bama. Even the Jekyll and Hyde, I just did Clemson, and going back and watching that game, the second half, Georgia was about as good as you'll see a team for a half of football in the second half against Clemson, both sides of the ball. They have not been able to put that together for 4 quarters yet this year. And kind of last week against Coach Levy's Bulldogs, it's 34-10 after they score in the opening possession coming out of half, and then they're kind of playing with their food like a child, and they don't take care of business. They give up 3 touchdowns. Now, the game was never in question, but they haven't put it all together. It's in there somewhere, I think. Right. And I think that you and I would both agree they're going to need to put it together for 4 quarters if they're going to go into Austin, Texas, and beat to this point, what's been the most complete team in the country. So I'm fascinated by that matchup. I do think Carson Beck has started to figure some things out throwing the football. When you look at the second half again in that Bama game, played well against Auburn, had a good game, got to take care of the ball, but had a good game. And targets starting to emerge against Mississippi State. They're going to challenge that Texas secondary more than they've been challenged to this point. But I think it's going to be fantastic. Hopefully, Oklahoma can handle their business, and I should be back home in time to settle in and take in the second half of that game. It's going to be a lot of fun. ABC on Saturday night.
Sooner great, ESPN analyst Dusty Dvoracek in the house. Dusty, as we transition into Sooner talk, what do you see from South Carolina? What kind of challenge do the Sooners face this weekend?
Well, the first thing that jumps off the page at me, I just had this team 2 weeks ago, so I've got a really good bead and feel on them. Now, fascinatingly enough, in the game I had against Ole Miss, they just decided not to show up. Like, it was bizarre. I was stunned at what happened in Columbia, South Carolina 2 weeks ago, because I really thought we had one of the best games of the weekend. And Ole Miss was coming off a loss. South Carolina was coming off a bye week. It was almost like the bye week was, worked against South Carolina in that game. And they just didn't play well. But the first thing that I look at with this team is the defensive line. And they have two excellent edge players. I mean, there's a lot of good pass rushing tandems. I would put what Dylan Stewart, the fabulous freshman, and what Kyle Kennard, the senior Georgia Tech transfer, I would say that they're the best tandem I've seen this year. Whether in person or on film, they're excellent. And both guys are long. Kennard's got a really good inside move. He's not as loose-hipped, but he's just veteran, really good against the run. He's going to pose a threat. Dylan Stewart is freaky now. I mean, he is a freshman. He has got a great get-off. He's really loose-hipped, long-limbed, and he can bend the edge very, very good. So that's the number one thing that I look at when I look at this team. They've got a really good safety in Nick Emanwari, they call him Nick the Eraser, and he will come down and he will hit you. He plays physical. Speaking of hit you, Debo Williams, a veteran linebacker that is downhill, uber aggressive, and that's really what this defense is. They're an aggressive defense, and they're gonna come after you, and that's just the way that they play. And I like the rotation they have on the inside. Tonka Hemingway is probably the best of their interior guys. But really where they make their hay is the edges and then through the middle at linebacker and then at safety. I don't think that they're great at corner, but I do think that, you better have a plan for out there on the edge. And whether it's tight ends, it's chippers, you need a plan to deal with those edge players that South Carolina poses. The biggest area of weakness of this football team to me is their offensive line. I think Oklahoma's front can have a ton of success. They've given up a ton of pressures, a lot of sacks throughout the course of the season, and I think that is an area that Oklahoma can have some success, and they need to take advantage of it, Plank. Last year for South Carolina, their O-line struggled, and it was like revolving door. First 8 games, they had 8 different starting lineups. This year, they've had continuity. They've had the same group. They just haven't been very good. So that's an area that I think Oklahoma could take advantage of. And, Lenore Sellers, they want to run the football, okay? Last year they were a terrible rushing team. This year they made a lot of additions to try to help that rushing attack, most notably Rocket Sanders, the Arkansas transfer at running back. And he is a big, thick, powerful running back who's got good long speed in the open field. And so, dealing with him, slowing him down, will be a real key. And then with Lenore Sellers, he's a big-bodied runner, and they want to run him. I mean, they're gonna put the ball in his hands, and he's every bit of 6'3", 245. He is a big-bodied guy, and you better put multiple hats on him and get him to the ground. And they're gonna utilize their running game best they possibly can. I would imagine, given some of the chunk plays Oklahoma's given up in the throw game, they're probably going to try to challenge that secondary and see if they can tackle better. and keep guys in front of them. But I think the biggest key with this, the D-line needs to dominate that offensive line and slow down this rushing attack with Sanders and Sellers. And if you can do that, I think that's the path to me to a successful win. And this is an offense that's turned it over quite a bit here these last couple games.
How is the overall vibes? Because, as you mentioned, you were there for the South Carolina Ole Miss game, which was a very frustrating game for South Carolina fans.
Yeah.
But what's the vibe you get on how they're viewing the future? Is it going to be Coach Beamer's job? Is it going to be Shane's job for a while? Is he on the hot seat at all? I don't know. What's kind of the vibes around that program right now beyond just the talent and the scouting report?
I think it's a fair, good question. I don't know. He's such a likable guy, as you know, man. And, we sat and we met with him for 45 minutes. He's just awesome. How anybody can meet, talk with, and be around that guy and not just root for him, it's tough. Obviously, I don't think Sooner fans are going to root for him this week, but you know what I'm saying. He's just he's about the right stuff. He's a good guy, and he's a good coach. His first 2 years, I think he slightly exceeded expectation, especially, you go back to that 2022 season when they got that big win over Tennessee late in the year. That's when Spencer Rattler had that monster game, and then they beat Clemson the next week. Right. And then last year they probably fell short of expectation, and they never could get the O-line right, and it never really clicked last year. And so this year I do think that there's pressure in these SEC jobs, man. It's just the reality of it. I don't think he is in jeopardy of being let go, but I do think it's important how the end of the season goes for them. And I think that obviously if you fall short of 500 next year, there's going to be a lot of eyeballs, squarely on Shane Beamer.
Gotcha.
But I think he's in an okay spot right now, but we're only 6 games in.
True.
He's got a game here in Norman. He's got Texas A&M after a bye coming to town. He's got to go to Vanderbilt, and he's got Missouri. And then obviously you close up with one of the hottest teams in the country at Clemson. So a lot of season left, but I'll tell you what, I don't think that's an easy job, man. I really don't. And I know that, Steve Spurrier goes there and he has a lot of success. And it's easy to say, well, that's what we want. That's what we expect every single year. It's not. They've got great buy-in by the fan base. I don't know what the realistic expectation of that fan base is, but I'll just say he needs a strong close to the season. Not because he might get fired, but I think it'll be a little uncomfortable heading into next year if they don't finish well here down the stretch.
Dusty, how do you fix lack of execution when you see things get executed in practice, but then it doesn't translate to the game? We've heard Coach Venables kind of allude to as much offensively. How does that get fixed?
Well, that's $1 million question right there, Josh. I think I think that's one that, it's funny you mentioned that. I was just doing radio this morning, and Peter Burns was on with us from SEC Network, and he was talking about Tennessee, and I guess my man Cole Kubick was doing a breakdown of Tennessee, and his big point was that there's no problem with the scheme in Knoxville. It's just the execution. They're just not executing. Right now, Tennessee's got an offensive identity crisis going on as well over the last really second half against Oklahoma into these last couple of games. And it's funny. I love my man Cole Kubick. He's great, but it's just execution. There's nothing wrong with the scheme. Just execution. Try to tell that to an Oklahoma Sooner fan right now that it's just execution and not any part of the scheme. I don't know. I don't want to lie and give you an answer that's not real. I don't know, because that's the whole point of practice, right? The whole point of practice is that you do it. You practice situations, you repetition, you do it over and over with the expectation that when you get into game situations, you go out and execute. And it's just second nature, right? That's what practice is. That's what going over, whether it's in walkthroughs, it's in the film room, it's out there, live against your one offense, against scout team, whatever it may be. You rep, you do these things over and over so that once you get on Saturday, it's second nature. and you just go execute. There's a disconnect somewhere. I don't know, Josh. All I can say is that's why college coaches are paid a lot of money. Like that's the reality of it. That's their job. That's what they have to figure out, whether it's changing, whatever the disconnect is. Is it a lack of understanding? Is it a lack of, for lack of better words, poo in the bed? Whenever you get out there in game situations, how do you better replicate a game situation in practice? That's what this staff is tasked with right now, because it is clear there is a lack of execution, and I got no problem saying that. When you go back and you watch the film, there's a lack of execution. I hate to say this, but across the board. I wish I could just point to one area and say that, well, it's here, or it's there. There's lack of execution all over the place, and it's not always on the same play or with the same group or with the same guy. Unfortunately, it's kind of rearing its ugly head in different spots, and it's led to, let's be honest, a really abysmal offense. But I think if I had that answer, or the Oklahoma coaching staff had that answer, Josh, I think everybody be in a much better place here right now. But they've got to figure that out. That's their job. That's what they're paid for, and that's right now, this week and moving forward, they've got to figure out how to take what they're doing in practice and then on game days be able to execute at a high level.
Agreed. All right, let's get our break in here real quick. More with Dusty Dvoracek coming up. We're at Caven's Disaster Response Group on a Wednesday right here on the Ref.
This is the Ref Sports Radio Network.
I wanted to play this for you real quick, Dusty, before we hit the Knippelmeyer Chevrolet text line.
Okay.
Brent Venables was asked yesterday, hey, have you what's your philosophy on in-season coaching changes? Here's what Coach said.
You go back and look at where I've been. I've not been a part of any staff changes in the middle of the season with Bill Schneider, Bob Stoops, or at Clemson with Dabo. And, there's always problems. Sometimes people know about them, sometimes they don't. There's always some level of struggle, and you got to work through your problems, find the best possible solutions. And if you have success, it's everybody. And sometimes when you don't have success, people want to point to one guy. And sometimes it's probably appropriate to blame one person, but most of the time it's not. It's a combination of a lot of things why you're struggling. And so again, you try to put it all together and have a perspective, not make any rash decisions based on the information that you have. And at the end of the day, there's nothing easy about any of it. And but I've been a part of those staffs too, where maybe at the end of the year decisions were made, at the end of the year, but nothing midseason.
Which got to this question. So that's what Coach said about it. We made it clear, you and I and Josh, I think, aren't going to sit here and call for people's jobs quite yet.
Can I just comment real quick before you play the next clip? That's a great clip. That's the way it's got to be. I'm sorry, like what positive can come right now of staff changes? Like I'm not saying that somebody can't provide an instance where this could be disproved. Right. What would getting rid of a coordinator at this point do? Do you think that's going to fix these problems? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I agree with Coach Venables' philosophy. I've never been a part of a team that did something like that, and quite frankly, I think that I remember Lincoln Riley did that with Mike Stoops. And it was bad on defense. Does anybody remember when Ruffin McNeil took over? Did it get any better?
Not necessarily.
I mean, I think statistically it actually got worse.
Right.
I think they were just fortunate that they had really good offense and quarterback play that could somewhat mask that, and you made it through. But nothing was fixed. Nothing got better. So I would agree with what Coach Venables had to say there. And I know that is not what everybody wants to hear. I recognize the masses, they want a pound flesh, Plank. That's what they want. They want fire and brimstone. But I just don't think that as much as you may think that's the answer, I don't think that's the answer. I don't think that will fix anything.
Yeah, me neither. So with that in mind, the 402, that's straight out of Nebraska, asks, have you ever as a pro or even in college you didn't experience this obviously because Bob Stoops never did it, but as a pro, were you ever part of a team where a coach was fired mid-season, and what was it like? Did it help? Did it hurt? Or no change? I don't think you've been a part of one, were you? With the Bears?
No.
No. Yeah.
No. I wasn't. Not at the Bears, no. I mean, nobody – I mean, I went through like a quarterback change. I mean, I watched the city of Chicago break Rex Grossman
yes.
like a pencil.
I forgot about that. Oh, my
he
gosh.
went from sky-high confidence to
Toast of the town.
Well, yes, to I think he was the NFL Offensive Player of the Month in September, my rookie year, and it just got a little worse and got a little worse and got a little worse. And we wound up going to the Super Bowl, and he played poorly down the stretch, but we were really good run the ball, really good defense, and he played poorly in the Super Bowl, and he played poorly to start the next year. And I remember we had fan appreciation night before the season started at Soldier Field, and he threw a pick in the scrimmage. The whole place just booing him. And I just remember thinking, oh my, this is fan appreciation night. And it never got better. And I watched, but I've never been through that. I haven't. So it's hard for me to comment. I know it happens, and it's clearly been something that some coaches have used, and definitely not unheard of. I'm never a big fan of it in season, and I've never personally been attached to anything, so it's hard for me to offer much perspective.
The Waffler. Dusty, what do you think about plugging in freshmen into the offensive line now because it's that bad? Would you do it?
I mean, if they can play, I mean, like, it's so hard to say, man. Like, I'm not at practice. Bill Bedenbaugh knows what he's doing. The guy's got a track record. If he thought that freshmen were going to help provide a spark or give him and this offense a better opportunity to succeed, he would do that. I think just saying, well, you got nothing else to lose, just fire him out there. I mean, do I want to see EPL out there moving bodies? Big Eddie Pierre-Louis?
Yes.
Absolutely. I would love to, but is he ready to play? I mean, do we I don't know. I mean, it's not foreign that true freshmen step on the field and have success, but I don't know what's going on in practice. I don't know what some of these guys are showing them. If you don't know what you're doing and you're a liability out there, I think it's hard to trust, maybe a young guy in those spots. But, hey, if there's any freshmen, I'll say it like this at this point. If you're even or it's close, I would be more than happy to give some of those young guys an opportunity. But if it's not close and you don't feel that they give you any opportunity to be better, I don't really know the point in firing someone out there. I'll tell you this, though. The player that I walk away from that OU Texas game with feeling as good about as anyone on that roster was a true freshman, Eli Bowen.
Yeah.
That dude was awesome.
Yeah, he was really good. He was really good. And, again, with just the unique nature of how Oklahoma had its cornerback snaps, it makes you wonder if maybe Woody Washington is struggling with something health-wise. Maybe Des Malone is. But at the very least, you feel good about what Eli Bowen is bringing you. I thought this was a good question.
Okay.
Or maybe scenario. Brazilian Sooner says, Dusty was talking about Beamer's job. It got me thinking. Sam Pittman was going through that, too.
Yep.
They upset LSU this week at home after beating Tennessee. What can you really say? This conference is truly unpredictable every single week. You can go from 0 to hero in a heartbeat and the exact opposite way in even a quicker heartbeat.
I'll tell you this. I said this after they beat Tennessee. And again, I'm not a member of that fan base, and I'm not living there in Fayetteville. But this was my thought after that. Get off Sam Pittman's back, man. I mean, I don't know what the expectation at Arkansas is. They had a step back last year. That team is playing for him, man.
Yeah, they are.
I mean, that team is leaving it on the field. I mean, the two games they've lost, unfortunately, I was there to call those games for him, so I'm sure he doesn't want to see me anytime soon. But they outplayed Oklahoma State, I mean, massively. I think they outgained them by 250 or more yards. against A&M, they're in position to win that game, and I think we all feel like A&M's a pretty good team. They just beat Tennessee, and I don't know what happens on Saturday night. I don't know how healthy Taylon Green is right now, but Sam Pittman knew coming into this year, and he said it at SEC Media Days. He said it with us in both the games we had. Look, I know my job's on the line. He brought in Bobby Petrino because he knew he had to get better production out of his offense. He made a great hire in Travis Williams, who's done a phenomenal job with that defense. But the number one thing, man, is that locker room, those players, they play their tails off for him, and they're sitting here at 4-2. Now, we'll see exactly where the season goes, but they get to 6 or 7 wins. Do you really want to run Sam Pittman out of Fayetteville? I say no, but I know the question was more about the unpredictability of the SEC. You're darn right. I mean, I hate to put Mississippi State in this category. It feels like they're at the bottom, though they've shown some signs first half against Texas, even the way they fought in the second half against Georgia, that they're getting a little bit better. But week in, week out, again, Auburn hasn't won an SEC game this year. Is it going to surprise me at all if they go into Missouri and win? Absolutely not. That's why you better strap it up and come ready to play each and every week. This league, we know that there's really good talent and really good teams at the top, but you show me Plank all the way down, even Florida, the way Florida's playing right now. I mean, they haven't quit on Billy Napier. They outplayed Tennessee in Knoxville in front of a wild stadium. Like, there's nowhere on the schedule where you're going to point to and say, well, that's a gimme. That's a win. There's games where, you look at it and you say, it's a favorable matchup. I like where that's at. We can definitely win that game. But I think for pretty much every team across the board, like, you got to come correct. You got to come ready to play, or you're going to find an L, man. It's a tough league. It really is. We knew that coming into it.
580 Nate, speaking of Mizzou, recommendations on how to get the Faroe Field stench off of you and your belongings when you leave.
The Faroe Field stench, help me out here. What is?
It's just Oklahoma fans hate Missouri is what it is.
I think, is that Faroe Field?
Yeah.
I've only been there twice.
Okay.
We played there in 2002. That's the famous Chris Chester fake field goal moment, which,
that's right.
I mean, one of the all-timers right there. I swear, how he caught that ball. The call itself, I mean, you want to talk about stones. I mean, Coach Stoops that's when he was just grooving, man. I mean, that's when there's like almost, there's so many moments, and I'm sure there's some that I'll forget, but it's like when he rolled the dice, man, it was always 7 or 11. Like, and I mean, he was hitting. He was hot dice table. But that play, that's the Brad Smith game.
Yeah.
That's when Brad Smith, no one really knew about Brad Smith. And then after that game, it was like, oh my gosh, this guy he's off the charts. But I swear, Chris Chester, there's no way he had his eyes open. And I'm pretty sure that ball stuck to his chest and he just covered it up with his arms. And so that was the first time. And then I did a spring game there. I've never called a game there in Columbia, I guess, at Faroe Field, which I better get to know pretty well so I can say it on the broadcast on Saturday.
A couple more. We'll hit, Josh, if there's another text you want to get to. I'm just curious, when you go and you talk to these coaches, I am fascinated by what Eli Drinkowitz has done and is doing at Missouri. I grew up in St. Louis, so I watched a lot of Missouri football, and that was like one of my first teams that introduced me to college football. And that place has always been so challenged, just period. It was overmatched in the Big 8. Then you go to the SEC, and it's overmatched a bit. But and it's a team that we're going to see later in the year, and we've already had the fight with Missouri over Caleb Green. But what's kind of been your read on Drinkowitz? Because it's kind of impressive to see what he did last year, because that is a really hard place to win. There's a lot of places like that in the SEC. South Carolina, I think, is like that. Arkansas could be like that. But Missouri is really near the top of that list, in my opinion, of hard places to win.
It is. I'll tell you, I think it shows Gary Pinkel was a heck of a football coach. I mean, because he had a role in there for a little bit. I mean, he was double-digit wins. I think it was like 3 out of 4 years, and even when they first went to the SEC, didn't they win the East? Yes. A couple of those seasons?
Yeah.
I mean, he did a really good job. So shout out to Gary Pinkel for the job that he was able to do. Again, it's funny, back to like the Sam Pittman conversation. Do you know one of the coaches that was on the hot seat going into last season? is Eli Drinkwitz. I mean, there was a lot of question about him. I think he was right at 500 his career since he had been at Missouri, and then he popped off that special season. I did that Cotton Bowl against Ohio State. That was a massive win for their program. Drink's a good coach. He was at App State, and I think he's stabilized the program. But, I mean, even his first couple years, it was a struggle. Last year, and I think the remainder of the season is going to be interesting. Now, they got a favorable schedule when the season started. Like, when you looked at their schedule, you thought, oh, man, a lot of people were picking them to be the playoff, could be a 10-win team. I'm still trying to figure out exactly what this team is, who they are. That game against Texas A&M was kind of a make you take a step back and say, wait a second, exactly, what's going on. Brady Cook has not been as good as he was, but I think that like a lot of places, you better be a really good coach there. Gary Pinkel proved that you can win and win successfully, and then Eli Drinkwitz, he obviously was able to get them back to 11 wins last year with that win over Ohio State. So I think that he's clearly shown that you can win there. Sustaining success, I think that's the key for anybody, and this is a big year to follow up that massive season with another success.
I know you're going to be working. Before we let you go, what do you need to see for success for Oklahoma this weekend, Dusty? What do you need? What do you want to see from them this weekend?
I want to see them execute on offense like everybody else.
Right, exactly.
It sounds so basic and so simple, but just the basic things, just blocking the right people, running backs. If there's been some holes there, you got to make a defender miss. When throws are there to be made, have good footwork as a quarterback, have good mechanics, find the open receiver. I mean, I'm not looking for 550 yards of offense, but just be able to execute and run the offense that's put out there. That's players and coaches. That's not just me saying, the players got to execute. No, it's the coach's job to put them in position to be able to go out and execute. I think that, keys for me are, going to be slowing down those edges. They have two very good edge players. They can be game wreckers, and they can create a lot of chaos and a lot of havoc, both in the run game and in the throw game. So as far as keys go, having a plan for what you're going to do with your tackles, how you're going to help them, and how you're going to try to slow down those guys off the edge. I'd love to see maybe a little bit of screen game incorporated to try to help those guys out. Defensively, I really think this is a game the defensive line can feast and have success. I do not think this is a great South Carolina offensive line, and I think the defensive line has been pretty consistent. So want to see that, and just find a way to win, baby. Find a way to win.
As one great man once said, just win, baby. Safe travels to Columbia, Dusty, and we'll talk to you next week, man. Have a great call this weekend.
Hey, appreciate it, Plank.
See you, brother. Dusty Dvoracek, every Tuesday and Wednesday.